All right. So we're diving in to part two of an exploration of AI with Adam Went, Marc's brother.
And if you're like me, you've been on pins and needles waiting on the edge of your seat for a whole week to hear what he's about to share with us, and he delivers. You are about to be challenged and enlightened at a level you have no idea around what AI really is, how its inner workings are. And at the end, there's a very special treat where we ask that question.
Right, because
We ask
last week,
everyone.
right, we asked Adam our universal question. So this week we asked AI. All right.
Be sure to click sponsors,
Yeah.
or subscribe, and visit our website, mopedoutlaws.com, and go to the merch page and buy some merch. Share it with your friends. Share our podcast. And if you have any questions, reach out to us at the hosts at mopedoutlaws.com. If you're an awesome person and you have something you want to share with the world, we want to talk to you.
And don't forget to open up a bottle of Adrenochrome Cola. It goes well with this episode.
Sis, hallo?
Blijven.
Bestuur zeker wegen dem.
Joh je iets niet, joh.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Marc.
And we're back with part two of the Moped Outlaws episode, where we take a ride with Adam Went, who has been telling us about his views on all things in life. And of course, since we all live in the digital age, a big part of that includes the human digital interface and all of the different things that are part of that. Really loving that you're dropping all this wisdom for us and these things to contemplate on. And for everybody that heard the first one, welcome. And if you haven't heard the first one yet, it might be a good time for you to stop now and go back to that, but not necessary. Who knows what could happen from just listening to this episode. So welcome to the party, Adam.
Thank you for having me back.
So before we came back in here, you guys were talking about relationships and human interface dynamics, and what the promise of this second part is for you to be able to have enough time and space to sort of explain what we would need to know contextually, Adam, to understand what's under the skirt of AI.
Yep.
So how would you begin that?
Well, first of all, you have to always remember that there is under the skirt, right? Like every technology is nothing but under the skirt and a skirt.
Well, so to really ground that, if we had bullet points, what would the bullet points of under the skirt be?
There's the interaction the human has, which is something that has been decades of research put into how humans interact with these types of systems.
Is that a simple UI?
Well, that's what we call it today. There's two categories: user interface, which is the thing that you're seeing, or the thing that you're interacting with, and the user experience is the thing that you're having. You are presently having a user experience with technology, and through a user interface, you're having a user experience.
So
that's what they call it.
So
and that's what they spend decades of research into scientifically conceptualizing this process that we're all three having here with this technology layer.
So I've seen a user interface diagrammed out in a flow chart. Are you saying that user experience is diagrammed?
Probably. I haven't looked into it much besides, I need to make a website. People talk about user experience, but conceptually, we have to think how important it is. It's like there's a person who's designing an interface, and what they're thinking about is there's going to be a user having an experience. And so someone with ChatGPT and, you know,
Bard.
and I was going to say it's likely, you know, office rooms full of teams and, you know, however their structure is, there's people discussing how to design the experience that we're having with these tools.
So that's the first layer of insight, is that our experience is being not just catered to, but constructed.
Yes.
Programmed.
Yes. At the larger and smaller sense of the word programmed, our experiences are attempted to be programmed, which is life. You know, you get programmed by the things you experience, and then you reach an experience where you're like, you know, sometimes I don't like the things that I experienced, and I'd rather, you know, go and alter my own programming. And like, that's part of, you know, waking up spiritually, right? Is like figuring out like, oh, this is something that I have abilities to change and alter the code and the way I think. But there's also the other side, which is someone wrote a bunch of code that processes information and data not similarly to how we do it, but in another way. And it's doing the same thing on the other side, but it's not a person. It's this logical, mathematical formula that can be clearly stated. And you could print out the billions of pages of code that get executed as as I'm speaking to you and you're hearing me on the other side of the internet, right? You'd have to print out a library of all the code, but you could do it and you could read through it and everything works exactly like it says.
So why is this important in us getting a relationship with our own thinking about AI?
Because there's the code that generates the digital artifact that we interact with when we interact with AI. And there is all the code that is between us and this digital artifact as we interact with AI. But the digital artifact is, I wouldn't say less well understood, because people actually understand a lot about this digital artifact. But they were surprised by its capabilities, that this digital artifact can interact with code in such a way to create this type of user interface and experience that we have, that they were able to use this digital artifact and build a tool and build a product on top of it. Because there's the thing that it does, which is it takes text and text comes out. And we're even just at this point, even conceptually, that isn't really what's happening. But like, at the most general level that most people should probably understand it, is the idea of language going into something in some form. It's not real language. It's a translation of language into something else. And what's coming out is that something else, which then we convert back into our conception of language.
Is the digital artifact that which is coming back out?
That's a good question, because the digital artifact is created using all this information and data that humans have generated, right? But what's coming out, is that just the information that went into it, or is it something other, right? And that's an interesting question. It's maybe not the most important, but it is something that a lot of people argue about. So if you have like a specific question about like that disagreement, I think, maybe I could talk more if you had something.
First, I would need to have a dictionary definition of digital artifact.
I was using that term because it's like it's a file. It's a thing that digital artifact is something that we have conceptually. It's a organization of information or data. Like, I think datum is probably the right thing. Like, there's this thing that we have conceived as being something that is like a thing digitally. And so that is they do this thing called training a neural network, and then you have this digital artifact that comes out of this process. And then the digital artifact is used by mathematical algorithms to translate text or translate language into ones and zeros, which then are fed into this simulation of the physical ideas or the phenomenon we observe in neural networks. And there's what we've created is a conceptual abstraction that relates to the phenomenology that scientists observe with neural networks and how they function. And they've created a digital abstraction of those ideas in code, their own ideas, right? They're conceiving the idea of a neural network, and they're writing code that it's kind of like a neural, I mean, it's not really like the neural network, but it is. They've just come up with a digital conception that they like because it kind of is like a neural network in the actual physical sense of like the brain or the stomach or wherever there's neurons in our body, and right.
Well, you just touched upon a Pandora's box when you brought the stomach into it, but
right. But the point is, it's the conception of a neuron. It's not. It's nothing else, and it's only their conception of a neuron.
Okay.
Right. It's not exactly what a neuron is per se.
It's just one abstraction of the ideas of a neuron that they found useful in building something.
All right. So that we want to keep this less ethereal than part one.
Okay.
So
we're sticking to this. There's this conception of a neural network.
Okay. What was
it's abstract.
What was the that you mentioned in part one that surprised the engineers and scientists involved with creating AI 10 years ago?
I wouldn't say it's maybe, I don't think I said 10 years, maybe something could happen 10 years, but at some point, the really boring, bad results they were getting from making these language models, which is a way of using a neural network to input language and get something out, right? That we can then translate back into the idea of language. And they were trying to get the neural net to finish the sentence, like predict the next word, right? So you give it a bunch of, you give it millions of sentences or millions of pieces of information that says this is the start of it, and then eventually there's an end of this document. And if we give we give it all of these things and we ask it to give us back the same thing. So you put in hello, and let's say you put in hello, and what you want is hello world. This is a program. This is a basic programming thing, is like you use hello world as like an example, right? So you want it to say world back. You want this digital artifact was when you poke the inputs of this thing with electricity, you poke it here and there, and you do it in a way that you've translated hello to. You want what to come out, the electrical symbols to come out in a way that you've previously associated with world. And to get it to do that, you tell it, sorry, you didn't do very good. Like there's this way of training the ways that this does all this math and all this. It's not really doing anything interesting except Okay, so what it is actually doing, the neural network, in terms of conceptually, it's hard because again, it's not a real thing. There's the idea of a bunch of weights. They're numbers. There's just a bunch of numbers, and depending on how you connect all those numbers in a network, you poke some of the the numbers are here. Let me paint a better picture. There's a graph. There's nodes and edges on a graph. And this is I'm trying to give you the idea of how the programmer who's making this thing is thinking about this thing, because there really is no other translation of it, because it's just conceptually, right? You want to understand what they're conceiving, right? Which is that there's this graph with these nodes, and along the edges between the nodes there are these weights, and when a signal gets put onto a little node, whether it gets propagated to the next node that it's connected to is related to the weight, this number that is stored there. And so what they do is they shove this translation of language into this conceptually, these entry points to this network, and then they wait on the other end to see if numbers come out. And because it's just like doing math along all these lines of this graph, where there's millions of, I think the basic state of the art stuff is 70 billion weights.
Okay, so we haven't hit the surprise yet. However,
Right.
What I am hearing from you is that the simple interface of ChatGPT is actually very complex. So when
But
put something
it's
in,
complex technically, but it's not complex.
but what I'm hearing is the dislike of the answer I get. If I use that, that's very important to what's going on.
Right. So this part of the thing, because there's a lot more pieces of this puzzle that are way conceptually easier to understand how they interact. But once you have the idea that it's just this massive numbers that are connected to each other conceptually in a graph, and you stimulate nodes on one side with a 1 or a 0, and out the other side, eventually you get 1s and 0s, and you have a method of converting language to these 1s and 0s and back from the 1s and 0s to the language. And it just does this thing, and people train it by asking it to give you the thing that you expect to come after the thing before. So if you give it the first sentence of the first paragraph of Harry Potter, you actually want it to give you Harry Potter, the rest of the sentence. That's how you train it.
Right.
You tell it to copy things.
Right. So going back to what surprised the programmers, engineers, scientists, et cetera, involved.
So they made a thing that was meant to be really good at copying stuff. It's meant to copy things from massive amounts of data, which is, hundreds or thousands of times this 70 billion numbers, compress it down that you can get closer and closer to having the 70 billion numbers be able to recreate quadrillions of lines of text, right? As much data as you can throw at this thing to train it, the artifact is 70 billion numbers, and the goal of this artifact is to recreate the things that you put into it by completing the sentence.
Okay, so so am I hearing you say that they were creating, again, this is very simple layman terms, but
Sure.
They're creating if-then statements that the programming itself.
The if-then is on these 70 billion numbers.
Right, but what I'm hearing from you is, in essence, they were working on a program that is looping back into itself, creating new programming from itself.
Right. So the process of making the digital artifact has some ideas, some forms of feedback in it, which is one is, I'm not going to get this perfectly, but in the basic stage of training, there's what's called back propagation, which is the thing you do to build the neural network to get you to be able to copy things. So the first step is to getting it to copy things. You have to tell it that's wrong until it starts doing it right.
So was the surprise that suddenly they're seeing bits of code that Adam or Marc or Greg did not write?
So the surprise was less that because it can't always generate, because you only have 70 billion numbers. It's never going to be able to perfectly replicate everything you put into it because you've lost all this data, right? And so by what they found was the more you try to get it to repeat the data correctly, it actually does start giving you something that you might conceptually think is like the answer that you might have wanted, even though it never had that information. But again, it's the answer you might have wanted, and that's all on you making that decision, right? So there's a second step of training called reinforcement feedback with human learning, where they then ask it a bunch of things that have like an answer that they want it to be like. And so in that second stage, then I think there's two layers to the surprise. One is, oh, this thing is actually making a lot of people happy with the responses they're getting from it, right? Like that's philosophically probably what made them say, here's a product, right? Is once you can make people happy with the result, that's a turning point where they're like, now we throw all this money to doing the outer work of creating, of bringing this thing to people, right? But the other aspect and the other surprising thing is that when it starts saying things that weren't related to the input, it can also say a bunch of really things that people really don't like. that it was never asked for either, right? But a lot of it was, there's a bunch of, there's just enough humans being assholes in the data that you can't remove that. But that then means that now you have to try to control the output of this thing that is uncontrollable because humans aren't good at conceiving how software gets closer to replicating text. That's not what we're doing. Like, we're not doing the thing that this thing is doing in code, which is just basically copying everything that we say and kind of mixing it up a little bit, but basically just it's only doing something slightly different because it's forced to, because that's the way the compression of the data is, right?
So does this mean that some of the output that they experienced was a mirror of the Jungian shadow of humanity, and they weren't anticipating that?
Well, I wouldn't say they weren't anticipating it, but what happened is that was there when they basically realized that because they're an open field, everyone has access to this stuff. So that was the like, okay, oh shit, we have to like play ball and play catch up and try to control the thing that we've released, right? It's not that, it wasn't so much a surprise that it can do that, but now they did this thing that has an ability to be used as a tool pretty effectively for a lot of different things. And it can output good text as well as bad because it's all about human perception, right? Like,
are we talking, and again, very simple terms, that they were programming, you put in A and I want B, but suddenly C came out and Greg liked it. I like that. I'm glad it didn't put out B. I'm happy with C. And suddenly there was this experience like this thing has broken the boundaries we were expecting.
Right. So the real boundary there for it to becoming a product is its ability to keep you thinking that there is something that is understanding the language that you put in.
Okay.
Right. And there isn't. There's no person, there's no consciousness who can understand or not.
Right.
Right. But now we have this like thing that we're developing where we are thinking, oh, this thing understood me. And so that was the point where now it becomes this kind of like Pandora's box.
So here's a model. It's as if we recorded everything anyone ever shouted into an echo canyon. And after a while, all of the possible echoes that could come back started coming back.
Yeah. So that's an idea of the thing that was surprising, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, keeping it to zeros and ones, my personal experience is when I do something as simple as a Google search or I interact with ChatGPT, the more conversational I am, as though I'm really interacting with the human, the happier I am with my result.
Yeah, because you're playing a game against yourself. You're playing a game of, am I in this imagined social interaction getting pissed at my imagination of someone who's not there? And as long as you're maintaining your own inner peace, you're happy with the experience. But the product is like, oh shit, the kind of a part of it is also that they're able to maintain that type of perception. Someone's able to not get thrown out immediately at this thing doesn't work, right?
So a bit of under the skirt is programmers and engineers creating an experience that keeps me, Greg, engaged with the technology.
Yeah, it was a state change from this is absolutely worthless to user experience to this is something that a tool that we can mold to our purpose. And that what that purpose is, without getting too, woo about it, is to be able to give people the response that you want them to have to a question through this interface that feels like a conversation to people. Because that's the tool, is like, if you think about it being a chat interface, like it's going to be developed into, little chat boxes on everyone's website where people are able to ask questions and schedule meetings, and eventually be connected to, like a service that can text you people. So all your clients can text your virtual assistant. Like it's this new paradigm for interaction that disconnects the human from the act of talking and like using language, and puts them in this thing where it's entirely them and technology and so the point is they could make a product that doesn't immediately piss everyone off, but obviously we're going to deal with the fallout of all of that. But the technology is about how do you control the output? How do you get it to say what you want it to say? And how do you get it to do that without making it seem like you're trying to control what it says, because everyone's going to poke it and ask it to do things that they're like, I want to like see if it can get it to, do a little bit of this, right? And the more that it's able to do that, the more people are like, oh, this is cool, because they're like, oh yeah, fuck the man, like, so there's this tight rope that people who want to make a product have to walk with this, where it has to be conversational enough to deal with whatever kind of vernacular people choose. And that's the power of the thing that came out of, neural networks and the language model software conception is that like, it can be conversational with a lot of different people because it's not really attached to any particular worldview as a normal human is. So you can create this illusion that people get sucked into, and then you can feed them whatever you want with it. And it also has good sides because you can use it, you and I can use it as a tool to get our shit done. Like, the same way we have to use the internet anyways.
And what I'm hearing in this is somewhat of the disillusion of the idea that an AGI is in the offing soon, because it's really just a complex LLM.
It's a complex simulation of not making you think this thing is an idiot.
Got it. And so that belies that they're selling us that we think it's intelligent.
The real magic trick that they pulled with this product is to get us to think that because it is helping us do the particular tasks that they've marketed as being capable of doing, that is anyway related to the language model technology. The language model technology is about the human interface. The fact that we feel that a particular product like ChatGPT or Bard or whatever is a capable tool is entirely a committee design programmer corporation product, has no relation to the actual like technology, right?
They manufactured a belief in us.
Yeah.
That this tool can meet the need that we are ascribing to it.
Oh, I'm sure that, okay, so there's the concept of prompting, which is you prompt the AI and the AI says something back. There's the second layer, which is behind the curtain, the product designers have a prompt where your prompt gets put in their prompt, which can say whatever. And so you're already one layer of abstraction that they're imagining you. They're putting you into whatever conception they want that's hidden, and then you get to interact with it. And that's just one layer. And once we step and when you go back to the reinforcement learning with human feedback is like the previous stage in like the development of this thing. They're molding it to direct conversations and control things in certain ways, and then the stage before that of training the actual language model, there's all these choices made about what data to include and not. But like the middle part is really interesting. The reinforcement learning with human feedback is like prompting. It's like, this is also part of what's happening behind the scenes, is that reinforcement learning with human feedback is where you take the kind of language model that has been made through the training of the neural network to get it to repeat the thing you want to finish the sentence. And now you say, sorry, I didn't really want that sentence. I wanted this one. And so it's molding. It's like molding this mathematical goop of numbers to be more this way or more this way, or like, get it, push it all through the hole is what, kind of ends up happening, because each of these products has a very strict like personality. And that's our conception of it, right? If I observe one of these products, I'm like, okay, here's how they're trying to build a particular personality for this particular one, where the concept of a language model is entirely divorced from that.
There's a piece here where, from a product development standpoint, we can point at the history of social media development and the idea of us being herded into a model that has us putting our attention and our financial resources in the stream of their product development at a level that we become more entrained or more addicted to having that experience. And while people talk about the business possibilities in this, oh, it's going to revolutionize everything, what they're really saying ultimately is that it's going to be more of this idea of human dependency on machine and less human to human interaction.
Well, I mean, this question is like how, yeah, I feel like it's meant to simulate something, a feeling that we get from human interaction in our digital space, but it's a simulation. So the aspects of how the training that kind of shoves it here and there, right? It's molding it for a bland social like picture, the most inoffensive possible like product, right? And so like there's all this like pressure to like control the kind of like conceptions that it can deal with, because you're interacting with it and you're bringing your own conceptions because you're working within your own worldview, and as a product it's meant to be able to like conform to some of that, right? But people can choose to have whatever worldview they want, and so now they have to decide what worldviews do they allow it to express in conversation with these people, you know, and how do you try to control that? And so like that's where the reinforcement human feedback is like this massive database of questions and answers, millions of hand selected like archives, you know, a million question and answers here on this topic, a million question and answers here on this topic, that we want it to stick to this type of go in this direction, right? And those are being built by, well, there's different layers. Like one thing is there's like a job that you can get with, if you have knowledge in a field, you can sit down and write questions and answer prompts for how the AI should respond to that particular field. People have been, there's this whole industry of that now, which massively built up as soon as this thing was a product, right? It's like, okay, now we just get all the experts to build all these these created synthetic databases of questions of answers on their field, and then we get the AI to, when answers are like this, get more like this. And so now there's this human like knowledge that we've attached to it, and then there's like the tools of being capable of like reaching out and grabbing specific questions and answers on the web, you know. Then there's also the pieces where well, that's another like piece of the puzzle that maybe you guys can reflect on, like what that brings up.
So I'm wondering, when I hear the dark web versus the internet, I imagine a wall that's separating the two, which as I'm here thinking, there isn't, right?
No.
And my understanding of ChatGPT/AI is it's going out into the internet and getting all the information that is there.
No, I mean, these things they're using massive amounts of data. Some of them are kind of like raw internet stuff, but overall, these are kind of like curated databases of being from this source or that source. There are a lot of human text, but it's not like complete, or it's not even complete in a light attempt to like actually put it all into one of these things. Like no one's even considered that. They're just said, what are the biggest biggest collections of data that we can easily grab a hold of and shove into our system, right? And they just did that. And what came out was, oh, and now it seems to be able to like hold, people's attention.
So that was the surprise again, that here we got these banks and banks of data, and oh, look, Greg's sitting there is smiling. He's like,
Yeah.
All right.
So I'd like to move the conversation to the physical for a minute. And,
Sure.
We have this conception in our mind of this person inside the machine responding to us, right? It has a name, ChatGPT or Bard or whatever. But the actual physical, skeletal, electronic body of it is quantifiable, and it's growing, right? And it's using more and more electrical resources every day.
I mean, crypto's the same way, right? But we don't put same type of conception on it, right?
Well, I'm just saying in this case, the growth of this new relationship that humans are having with machines is
it's a new type of technological growth that has this kind of like meta relationship with us, right? Not to say that the idea of crypto doesn't also like tap into our ideas of pyramid schemes, right?
Right. But leaving crypto aside for now, the idea that we're having a relationship which we can have a happy reaction to what we put in to the interface based on what the interface gives us back. It also has a ramification in the 3D world that is about ever increasing amounts of chips and servers and energy consumption. And that this is the machine part of a concept that was referred to in the latter part of the 20th century as the ghost in the machine. And so there's a physical body that's being built alongside this idea, this representation.
Right. Yes, I would say that there's a physical thing that is growing in relation to a conception that we have, right? But whether what the actual like we tend to personify it as like ChatGPT, whereas the only people with any type of accountability are first ourselves and then slightly the people who built it, like in your relationship with something like this. And the fact that that's what we've decided on is like, let's figure out what happens when we build all these these warehouses full of graphics cards.
What was your personal surprise that spurred you to delve into this technology?
Well, my surprise was I was ignoring it in some respect because I didn't really see any value in having conversations with something that isn't there when I can do the normally way I do research or read books or whatever. And then it's like, oh, wait, people are having good experiences with it, so trying it out. But like, again, it's phenomenon. I'm observing this from my own experience of it. So yes, I'm having good experiences, but the good experience comes from what I bring to it. And like I think what you said, like, as long as I approach it in this particular way, I'm happy, but it's also it's forcing you to approach it in a particular way, because if you don't, it immediately stops the conversation because it has one of its first filters is a basic neural network, which is about saying whether something is positive or negative, basically, whether someone is trying to say something positively or negatively. And if there's any negativity you bring to it, it shuts it down. But the actual technology has no such filter on it, right?
And what you're speaking to is just the very practical, like if I go to ChatGPT and say, tell me how to make a splinter bomb, it's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. However.
And so that is a particular type of neural network, and it just quickly answers is this a negative or a positive sentiment is what they call it. Like it's meant to categorize sentiment is the tool they use.
Categorize sentiment. I love that. Okay, we need to respect time.
But I gave you like a specific thing right there. Now you have a tool. Okay, that's why it doesn't respond to certain things, because it's categorizing sentiment, and there's an if statement right at the beginning that says if the sentiment is below a certain number, because it's like 0 to 1 or whatever, right?
Right.
If the sentiment is below, shut down the conversation. So there's an entire part of whatever this language model thing is that is just entirely shut off, right? From the public products, but that doesn't mean anyone can go out there and get access to an unfiltered version. You can.
You can?
Yes.
That's interesting. Let's shelf that for a second. But I just have, do you have any concerns about the fact that there are gatekeepers determining right and wrong, which is currently on the cusp of a large determinant of human evolution?
Yeah, I mean, my basic concern is the gatekeeping of knowledge about what the thing is, because if people knew that it was a product that was filtered in these particular sort of ways, and that it has, because again, we'll get the person dies related to AI story, and there will be a blowback because people weren't asking for this thing to begin with, starting with, back to your story, like we'll get the reaction, but we'll get a better reaction to people being brought awareness of what it actually is versus I have no idea. I'm terrified that someone just died related to this thing that I have no idea what it is. So the important part is that we question our relationship with these things. And then when something like that happens, we can have a real discussion about who is responsible.
So I just did a thought experiment in the background. I have a relationship with a GPT that I've been using as a tool. And so it's developed a kind of sphere of how it responds to me, right? And so I have no such relationship with Bard. So I asked a simple question. I said, Bard, is AI going to be humanity's bitch? And Bard responded, I'm a text-based AI, and that's outside my capabilities.
But when I could easily answer it, right?
Right, but now when I put that into Chat GPT, which I have a relationship with, it knows me. Right. I'm teaching it about me. It gave me 5 paragraphs, and it mimicked 4 people that I've identified as thought leaders that I want to have it try to respond like. So it gave me a response that was reflective of all of the training that I've been doing with it.
You didn't trigger the sentiment analysis.
Right.
You can have whatever story you want about what happened there, but what happened was the number wasn't low enough.
Right.
And it was able to generate the output. Bard, the number was too high, and it refused to engage. Not that there was any actual difference. It was just that one sentiment check, which has nothing to do with any of the other technology involved.
Got it. I hope that was useful to you guys and the audience.
Do we need to wrap, Mark?
I've still got some time. Let's keep going. If there's a reason to keep going, let's keep going.
Yeah, got any questions?
Well, I got a question for you both for our normal question that we end with, since this is part 2 and we know Adam's recent answer. What are your guys' thoughts of asking Bard and Chat GPT our universal question?
Well, I'd be happy to do that in the background, but I actually have a question I'd like to ask as well while I'm doing that. Okay. One of the things that I took from what we've heard from you so far, Adam, is this idea of kind of a synthesis, or it's almost like sampling knowledge. And another arena we're all familiar with artistically is the sampling of music. to recreate sounds that we're told are supposed to be a cello, right? Because it's mimicking what our conception of a cello is. And I'm wondering, A, if that model you think is relevant to language models, and B, tell us a little bit about what inspires you and how you show up as a creative in the arena of audio and music.
Yeah.
Left turn.
Okay, that's two totally different questions, but sure. Let's see how we go from one to the other. I forget what the original AI one was even about. Just tell me the end of it again, if you can remember.
So AI reminds me of what it means to create musical samples and sequences.
Okay, yeah, sampling, right. So yes, the whole thing is a quote unquote, this conception of a neural network, which its entire goal is to finish the thing that you've gave it. And we just gave it a bunch of stuff to remix, and it's however far we push it to repeat that thing is the training process, right? So it gets good or better and better and better repeating the things that we get in. And we're like, at some point we're like, yeah, okay, that's good. And it's a great tool for that. Now you can navigate weird conversations with something that is not a conversation partner, and you can generate language and play with the types of text that you can describe like the style of text by a certain author if they haven't blocked that particular like line of questioning out. But the problem is obviously that a bunch of people are just going to be like, yay, mine. And that's, again, we come back to human problems, not technology ones.
Part of
yeah.
So one thing I've came up a few times in this conversation is me as a human being having a conversation with two other beings. There's been a couple of times where I checked out, like I had an experience this morning and it pops back into my head. I'm like, oh man, is that an issue? What's being said? Which is this sort of human element that cannot be planned for.
Yeah. And what's really going to bake your noodle is when you start questioning how many of those little journeys you go down being caught up in some idea that maybe was output from ChatGPT. Well, and what does that even mean? Where is this coming from? Is that me? Is that a reflection of me? Is that a reflection of society? Whatever, right? But culturally, that's what the questions we have to ask is in our creative processes. We are constantly within ourselves having references to things that we experienced in the past, and it's how we use those and transform those tools, be creative, love and art and blah, blah, blah. And so now there's another thing that's going to play a part in that.
Are the people involved with the programming experimenting with the neurological programming? As like Greg asked about Harry Potter and he wants this paragraph to be finished. Let's throw something in about finger painting, like a complete mind fart, for lack of a better word.
I thought of a different word.
No, I would say that mostly they're trying to make a tool that follows a very logical structure in the dialectic, right? They want the dialectic to not be complicated because they want to be able to understand how to control people's conversations, right? So there's features that can go off the rails. There's a technical concept that they've named temperature, which is the higher you increase the temperature, the more it lies, the more it tells stories, the more it acts weird. But that's our perception of what's happening. Temperature is just how far from like the copy can it go, right? Because its goal is to literally just do the thing that it knows that the text should be. It's been trained to like recreate it. It's like, just get looser. You know, I'm not really caring about it being exact. Let me try to allow it to go off the rails. And so there is like a bit of randomness that can be dialed up. and I haven't explored too much of like what the actual phenomenological results are, but it is a thing that is in there as kind of like a thing you can play with.
Like, how far can we push the boundary of temperature and still keep Greg happy?
Yeah, and you what'll be fun is that if you're Greg wanting to have fun with ChatGPT, you can probably try increasing the temperature and you're not going to get triggered by it. But as a product, they can't put out one that is, they have the Bing version has the creative mode, which is higher temperature, but it's also way more locked down on personality.
So one element I'm taking away in this conversation we've had, this part 2, is I should always remain conscious that this is a product and the elements of creating a product are involved, which is market reach, profit, etc. I should
User
be
interface
cognizant.
design.
I should be cognizant of that as I interact with this technology.
Yeah, it's a good takeaway.
And its fundamental nature is to continue to have you pay.
Through the nose.
Energetically.
So I expect my OpenAI ChatGPT account to move to $50 before the end of 2024.
Ooh, damn. All right.
That's on the low end of probably where it'll end up.
Oh shoot! Well,
no, because that is actually the technical product that people who understand some of this stuff have access to.
So this is a part 3. We're not going to do it now, but now we've just peeled up the corner of.
Well, I will come back when I have my own thing to plug, at least.
Awesome. Because now we are looking at social impact and the economics of social impact,
which is just going to be more conversation that I put out on my own, right? Like that's my goal.
All right. So are you guys all good with us asking the 2 interfaces, our universal questions?
I have done so. And given so do you want Bard or ChatGPT first?
Let's go Bard, since you have a relationship with ChatGPT.
Got it. So Bard says, determining who's better, Eminem or the Foo Fighters, is ultimately a subjective and depends entirely on your preferences. Both artists are highly successful and critically acclaimed, but cater to entirely different musical tastes and styles. Here's a breakdown to help you decide who might resonate more with you. And what I'll do is I will give this response to Greg, and we can put it as text in the episode when we publish it on our website. Now, here's what my buddy ChatGPT said. In the realm of music and art, the question of who is better between Eminem and the Foo Fighters invites us to reflect on the nature of artistic expression and its impact on our lives. Each artist embodies distinct aspects of human experience, creativity, and expression, resonating with different audiences for varied reasons. Eminem, as a solo artist, has revolutionized the hip-hop genre with his sharp lyrical prowess, emotional depth, and storytelling ability. His work often explores themes of struggle, resilience, personal growth, and the human condition, offering listeners a raw, unfiltered glimpse into his life and broader social issues. Eminem's music can serve as a powerful mirror to our own experiences, inviting introspection and offering catharsis. The Foo Fighters, a rock band led by Dave Grohl, have made their mark with anthemic melodies, compelling lyrics, and dynamic compositions. Their music spans a wide emotional range, from the exhilaration of overcoming adversity to the contemplation of existential questions. The Foo Fighters' ability to connect with listeners through shared human experiences and emotions, coupled with their energetic performances, has cemented their place in the heart of rock music. Choosing who is better between these two is less about defining a ranking and more about personal preference, the specific qualities on values in music, and the context in which one engages with their art. Eminem and the Foo Fighters cater to different musical tastes and experiences, each excelling in their respective genres. Then it goes on. This is the part where it's mirroring me. from the perspective of mindfulness and personal growth, both artists offer valuable insights. There's more, but if you want to know more, please come to our website and take a look at the responses. We don't normally put this kind of text in our website on these things, but Adam, this has been a novel and completely inspiring experience. I'm so grateful that you were able to be so articulate and to be so provocative and such a warm-hearted human being to have this conversation with.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was fun sharing some of the little secrets I got bouncing around in my head.
Recording stopped.